Hey everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Altered Insights podcast. We're blessed today, once again, to be joined by the entire crew. Myself, Alex, we have Trickster here, and Kawa, who's looking fresh with a new haircut. Those of you on YouTube being treated to an absolute Chad-looking fellow from Ireland. Kawa, let's start with you. How's your week been, and what have you been playing?
Yeah, it's been good. I finally nearly have a full collection, like a full playset of all my rares, all my commons. Obviously not every unique that ever existed, but even, accumulating all of these rares to have a playset has been quite the challenge, especially without the marketplace at the moment. But luckily, a friend told me about a place that opened a lot of Kickstarter boxes. I reached out to them, and I think for the moment I got a fair price on most of the rares. So I'm only missing, I would say, about maybe 10 to 15 in total now, and then I have absolutely everything, which is great. So I get to play a lot more decks. Not having certain rares for me was definitely restricting some decks that I wanted to build. Maybe not too much, but there were some key essentials that were missing for, let's say, Axiom or for Bravos. But since I've got my rares, I managed to finally build a Fen and Crowbar deck, which I have to say, I have been enjoying immensely, absolutely immensely. I just came from playing my Lorcana Locals. The new set came out today. One of my friends who also plays Altered, we whipped out our decks. We just chose a random deck each. We both got Fen, so it was a Fen mirror match, and it was absolutely insane. It was so much fun because even the end game came down to I was like winning most of the game, so I was much further ahead with my expeditions. So I needed to win one final expedition to win the game. So my plan was to play Twinkle Twinkle to try and put one of his cards asleep, but he had a Lyra Festival out. So if I did that, he could play an Aloe Vera from the reserve to then have it have fleeting and anchor, but he also had another fleeting character. So basically, my win condition was like, okay, I have to make this asleep, but then if I make this asleep, your plan will literally be play your Aloe Vera and win the game. So what I did instead was I had a one of rare hooked in my deck. And I basically just baited, I kind of baited him because I just played a few, one-cost cards, a few Martingales, and then I hooked his, biggest card over to the other side, and he just never even saw it coming. It was pretty fun. But not only that, it's I feel like the card availability you have when you, card options, rather, you have when you play the Fen deck are, so immense, because you get all these cards that you can play from your reserve, and the value I was getting from cards like Anansi was insane. Oftentimes a 2-cost 5/5/5 card, absolutely wild. So I'd have a lot of fun with that deck, and I've just finished building a Bravos deck. Still missing, I think, one of my rare Tiny Djinns, but I've opted to just play one common one anyways because it's only going to cost one more. And yeah, I've been messing around with that a lot. Still haven't actually decided which hero I'm going to go with, if it's going to be more Bazira focused on the boosts. It's interesting because I think a lot of my deck building decisions are often based on what unique cards I have. So it's I think if I'm playing these 3 uniques, even out of maybe the 5 or 6 that I have, it's probably more focused on, maybe it's better with Bazira than it is with the other heroes. So yeah, I've actually been having a blast. I just had to wait for my cards to get here, so I've been eagerly waiting. They came just before the weekend, so now I get to go to locals tomorrow and just play a bunch of different decks. I'm very fortunate that at locals we take it casually to the extent that we want to play a lot of different decks rather than focus on doing the one deck, because we don't have too many people there. So it would be a bit weird to just keep playing the same person for 3 rounds or 4 rounds with the same deck. So we kind of swap it in and out, and that's often quite fun. We try meta decks, and then we kind of go to switch to off meta decks, and it is a lot of fun. But yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Trickster. How's your week been?
It's been going well. I feel like I have a rotation of heroes where we've got the ones that are in the early stages where I'm cooking right now, working on decks, then some that I'm playing them, and then some that I'm okay, I've kind of optimized this, worn it out, and they're on the way out. So I feel on the way out right now is Waru and Nevenka. I've been playing those both a lot. Pretty happy with them. I did get to go to locals yesterday, and there were 6 of us, so nothing crazy, but Two of the people brought like trades and had like a pretty significant amount of uniques, so it was fun to do a little swapping. I think I traded at least 1-for-1 on uniques with each of them for one card, so that was pretty fun just to be able to kind of actually have that in-person opportunity to do some trading. Most of the time I'm just doing that like on a Discord or Facebook Marketplace or something, so that was cool. And then got some constructed games in, actually played 2 Nevenka mirrors, so it was interesting. It was Festival Nevenka versus my unique Kybera Nevenka. So it was interesting. I learned I wasn't the best equipped for the mirror with my list. It's kind of crazy with all of the access to sleep that Lyra has. You can put that Kybera to sleep, and that's bad news for me. I in one game I like played it out, and I knew that the tough was going to be high enough, but then on the next day there was like nothing left to do, because now that I double advanced, it's going to have like tough 0 or something. So it's like, what was a power play last round is a dead card for me. And then on our next game, it was crazy, because I was like absolutely dominating, got to 1 advancement away from winning. They'd only moved like 1 time all game, but then they had a festival out, and I was just like, I don't have a removal. If your hand is Kodama and Aloe Vera, you got 6 mana, you're just going to play them out. There's already a fleeting character in play. It's just over. I play out the cards, and they just slowly, first comes down the Aloe Vera, and then 2 mana left, down comes the Kodama. Oh, I don't know if I'd seen that in person before, the festival win condition. I had actually... I did have a removal, a Cloth Cocoon at the start in my opening hand, and I was like, normally I would keep this because I know that they're running 3 festival, but I'm like, if I put it in the mana right now, it'll just make the rest of this match so exciting, because I'll be on my toes, because I'll be like, will I get the next one, or like, can I play around it without them having it? So I think that was possibly a learning experience and a questionable choice, but I feel like for locals, I was like, if they get it, they deserve it here. I just want to like see this pulled off for once in my life, and it worked. It worked kind of like clockwork. So that was a lot of fun. The other thing I'm working on is I am getting some Aphanis gameplay ready for my channel, so you'll see that coming out soon. I feel like it's hard to like keep the steady stream of videos with like work and things, and then like the Robin nerf and all these random things just popping up. Everything's like kind of just distracting me, but I do have some gameplay that's been like sitting in my like video editor for a little bit. Hopefully I'll have that make it onto my channel this coming week.
Yeah, so I'm actually super excited to see your Aphanis deck, because I'd like to see how it would compare to the one that I cooked. And one of my favorite things is kind of going to the drawing board and trying to figure out like what different synergies I can develop, different decks and different heroes and stuff. I'm not a net decker. I like to try to create something new all the time, and then pass it to friends to get their advice on things, test it, reiterate on that process, and try to develop a better list each and every time. And for me, it's not about like playing the best possible win rate deck. It's about getting to the best possible win rate deck. It's about starting somewhere and building that process, right? Playing on BGA, playing at locals, and testing it with people. That's something that I super, super love about TCGs. So mark me as someone who's going to be watching that video all the way through, smashing the like button as well, Trickster, because I'm actually super excited to see some Aphanis gameplay from you, because I thought your last video with Lyra was absolutely phenomenal too.
Thanks. Yeah, glad to know we got some loyal fans. For anyone out there too, always let me know in the comments what decks you want to see. One of the cards I traded for this week was Nakisha Sakurabru, and I was mostly looking for that because I've had a couple people letting me know they want to see Akisha gameplay. So I do listen to that, and it is hard with so many heroes and needing to find the uniques. It can take a while, even if I've got an idea, but definitely listen to all of you out there.
I feel like Akisha is a hero that like a lot of people are down on. Like they feel like this is not a particularly strong hero. But I look at this and I'm like, in the right hands, I think this is an incredibly powerful card. And it's an incredibly powerful ability. And I think that a lot of players tend to use Akisha's ability like just right off the rip. But when I play Akisha, I'll often play out the turn. And then when there's a critical moment where like, okay, I need to know where this next card goes, then I exhaust after you. And I think that they get put in a position where they're like, oh man, like he's going to take advantage of this play. It's not about just using after you on the first first like move of the day. Sometimes holding it and then waiting for the opportunity to kind of like definitely take advantage of that additional information where you know, like, hey, are they going to tap out? You got 3 mana. Do you have another play? Right? I think that's super valuable. When I play Akisha, that's the approach that I tend to take. I tend not to use it right off the rip. That's why I like to build my decks with a lot of card draw, Studious Disciples, because Studious Disciples and like inexpensive cards, they often act like their own mini after use, right? And then when you're about to kind of try to win a location, or by that location I mean expedition, that one exhausted from the hero I think can be incredibly powerful. So I also would like to see a video about Akisha Trickster.
Sounds like we're going to have a Ysmir kind of month or something coming up.
Yeah. Now, for me, what I will tell you guys is I've been doing a lot of cooking, and I'm almost ready to kind of showcase some of my Muna stuff. And I've been really working on a Teja Nara deck. And I've been kind of like trying to figure out the right, the right balance of anchored plants. And I'm trying to lean more into the plant synergy, I think. Trying to utilize some of the uniques that I have and stuff like that to kind of take advantage of it. Now, I do think that Teja Nara, this feels like a very evergreen hero, where right now it might not be propelling at the top of the meta. It might not be like crushing the meta. I mean, we just had a major change, and we'll discuss that as our primary topic momentarily, that might shake the meta up quite significantly. But on the onset of Altered TCG, Teja Nara wasn't at the top. However, I feel like this effect is so unbelievably evergreen that it's always going to be valuable at some point. It's always going to be a good effect to have in this game. And so it's one of those heroes that I feel like will always age like fine wine. As more cards come out, you're just going to be able to utilize this this kind of like first character you play getting a boost. Obviously, you get to double dip on it with the anchored stuff. So every anchored character that comes out loves Teja Nara for the most part, of course. But before I pass this on to you guys to continue the discussion, I have to say I do have a major beef with Altered that needs to be resolved because I can't handle it anymore. All right? Please, we need a filtering option that just combines the base set and the Kickstarter set, because I'm trying to cook decks all the time and it says I have 2 of these rares, but I know I have Kickstarter versions, so I have to like search them up independently and all this stuff. We need like a unified version of that deck building interface that just shows me that I have like, oh, yes, you have like 8 Studious Disciples. And it doesn't matter if it's the Kickstarter version or the other version. You know what I mean? Like, it has been driving me nuts because I feel like it's so separate and they're not even on the same screen. You can't even sort them so like the 2 Studious Disciples will be beside each other. They're all over the place. So that's my one beef.
Yeah, that's like a very frequent complaint. I even see people online like looking to trade my cards so that I can just have like all of the same edition in my collection. They're like, trade Kickstarter for whatever, because they're just trying to find another way around resolving that.
Yeah, that's happened to me too, where like, I have the 2 rares and then I have the other one. And then like even in the deck builder, it's just like, looks so annoying because it's like, okay, it's like the separate versions. I know it's like, interesting example. I mean, Robin Hood being the main topic is funny because obviously there's the alt art Robin Hood within the Kickstarter. So, maybe if you want to be spicy, you want to run, like 2 alt arts and then 1 normal, or maybe you want everything to be together. But yeah, it is frustrating to an extent. But then I also kind of realize why it's separated, because it has to be kind of accounted as a separate set, but there's got to be an option where stuff can be done. I think honestly, in my opinion, it's probably a case of, at least when I talked to the team about specific things back when I was in at the Angers tournament, they were like, yeah, we've heard all, like I gave them a big list, I'd love this, I'd love that. They're like, yeah, we've heard all these ideas before, we've already given it to the team. There's like a massive priority list, and I understand there's some, I mean, we all know what's up here right now. It's the marketplace and print on demand. Like we know this is like right here. And I would say there's so many other cool ideas, because when you open up this game with it being so focused on, the digitization of the cards, there are so many features, so many things that could be done for data, for organization, for filtering. And I hope that, once we get past these big things of the marketplace and print on demand, some more time can be allocated to that. Because even though there's small things, like you said, Alex, like they are still important things, because these small things add up. It's like it's like what we have right now for the trading system, where it's like, okay, if I want to trade stuff, I had to do it in locals last week. I sold like 50 because I had like a box of spare rares. I sold 50 rares, and I had to go card by card and transfer it. Someone told me a cool trick, by the way. For those of you listening, if you guys are trading, some of you may know this already, but if you're trading cards, let's say you've got 10 cards you want to trade, it's way easier to open up your phone again, scan each card, it will instantly go to the page where you have it, and then you can trade, rather than I was like adding it to like, I was like doing my trade list, and then I was like typing and filtering for the cards. But if you have like 10 cards you're selling, like even though you own the card, try to scan the card again so it brings it up, trade, scan, trade, scan. It's way easier than like manually typing all of it out. And again, that's something I had to find out the hard way, unfortunately. But I know, I personally know that a lot of these things we're discussing, it's on their mind. It's just a matter of priorities, I think. And like, you know, the team isn't so big that they can focus on everything at once. But sorry, I think I interrupted you there, Trickster. I think you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah, I don't know where it was going at this point, but I mean, I'm sure there's like a lot of little changes they can make, but like you're saying, there's very big things that a lot of us are waiting for. So I guess people like Alex that are blessed to have Kickstarter and regular edition cards, they're just gonna have to wait a little bit for some of those problems to be addressed. I'm sure something like they could break it up so that on the card screen, which is kind of like browsing through your collection, they could separate it by edition. And then maybe on like the deck builder screen, they could make it so that since the edition is pretty much meaningless there, unless it's an alternate art, maybe for alternate arts, they separate those. But I feel like, yeah, they could probably just group all those together on the deck builder screen at some point, or at least have it filter it by name or cost or something. But I'm sure they'll get to that. I've always been like, trying to figure out, I'm like, I'll like sort it alphabetically so then like I can get the same editions or something to come up by each other. But then other times I'm like, wow, what if I could like filter by faction? I'm sure there's a lot of different things that they can
that's
get
what
to
I
eventually.
have to do as well. Yeah, it's filtering by alphabetizing, because then everything comes up. And then oftentimes I don't even click on, you know, what I own, because if I'm missing 3 of stuff, I just click on all cards. I'll filter by rares. That's what I had to do when I was looking for all of my rares. But that's one other little thing I'll say. Again, we're already nitpicking here to, like, you know, as I said, add to the list there. But another option for filtering that I'd like to see is to filter by card number. So I don't know how many people actually care about this or notice this, but this is how I organize all of my stuff. Are you saying you as well, Alex?
Yeah, it drives me absolutely nuts. I'm trying to get my binders all set up and stuff like that. There's no card, like there are card numbers, but then the faction numbers are all weird. I'm like, man,
yeah.
I just gave up.
So that's what I do now. So I've organized all of my binders it's all by card numbers. So if I have an Axiom common, the Axiom rare, I will have the out of faction beside that. I will have all of them there, because I've played a lot of this game now that I kind of know, okay, if I'm looking for, you know, the out of faction Flamel for Lyra, I'll just go to Izmir, because I know that Flamel is a Izmir character and stuff. But there are different ways that people can organize their collection. But I personally have just always been a numbers guy. And it's weird because certain card games organize it by, you know, it's numbers and it's alphabetized, or it's like, you know, characters and then spells and then landmarks and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like the little things, but yeah.
You know, that gets me thinking, did you ever realize that the factions are alphabetized? Because I was always like, how did they decide to put the order of the colors? And I was like, maybe they realized this order of 6 is like the most aesthetic for colors wise. And I'm like, nope, it's actually just A through Y or whatever. They just lined them up like that. So if you didn't know that, now you do.
That's actually exciting. I did not know that. Now that I do, it makes perfect sense. I wondered why Axiom was first. Like it's not, you know what I mean? It's just not like I wouldn't have thought. Like I thought maybe like Ortis would have been first. I don't know why I would think that either. But talking about Ortis, we should probably take a second, or I mean an entire podcast, to discuss what is probably the most shocking change that I've seen happen in a while in TCGs. And this took me by complete surprise. I don't know about you guys. I would have bet $1 million that this was not going to happen the way that it has come down. And for those that are unaware, Robinhood has been changed. And this is crazy to me because it is before print on demand, right, is ready. It is before the second set. And so they're just determining right now that Robinhood's got to go. It can't stay as it is. So why don't we get to start with this? And Trickster, we'll start with you here. Why don't you give us a little bit of background as to why Robinhood was so hated as it was and why they felt that this change had to happen as soon as it did?
Yeah, I feel like there's almost like multiple targets on this card's back that have like been bringing it hate from way back when, like even before the set officially released, even before like Kickstarter arrived. Once the full set was spoiled, people were like playing in tournaments online on things like Tabletop Simulator, and I played in one of these like events that was like kind of like celebrating the launch of the game. There was 8 of us that had like qualified for it, and 7 of us brought Waru already, even before the game was released. Back then, though, we were playing, each player brings 3 heroes. So it was just one of our 3 heroes for all of us. And then the only player who didn't bring it brought like 3 totally wild decks, like a Rack and Kibble, Rin Festival, and things, and was like, I'm just gonna like not follow what's good or whatever. And so it's like way back when, it's like kind of always been known that the bureaucrat strategy was going to be very strong, even from like before the game started. And so I think it's not like it's something that people have found a couple months into the expansion. From like day one, Robinhood has been causing terror, and this effect, well, not the one on the screen now as we see, but the original effect is for the common, it's characters your opponents played cost 1 more, and for the rare, it's any card your opponent played costs 1 more. And so this is just like a warping effect that changes the way you have to build your decks, because you're like, I can't just think about how to have a good mana curve against everyone else, but now I have to think about like, does my deck still work when every card costs twice, like 1 more? And so this card, it's just been frustrating people from the moment they got like their cards. They went to their locals and they're like, I'm gonna play something fun. Their opponent drops a Robinhood, and now it's like I can't even, like, my hand does nothing. It's very hard too for like mana. You can't know what you want to put in your mana, because you don't know if you're gonna be playing against, like, with the cards in your hand costing the same or +1 when you go into a turn. And so this card has just been a headache to go against. I think that the designers and like Equinox have made statements that explain it the best. They've said that the reason they are eventually going after this card, and they kind of warned us in an ANA, they warned us that they were going to go after it because it creates like an unfun player experience. Not because they thought it was too strong, but just because they think that, and possibly it is too strong as well. We don't need to talk about that right now. But they were just saying that it creates an unfun experience where it's like, instead of increasing the options that you have available to you while playing the game, it's like decreasing the options and decreasing the fun for your opponent. And so like it makes sense if you think about it. Like the less cards and the less decisions you make in a turn, the less like opportunity you have to enjoy what you're doing. And I think a lot of players prefer a game where your opponent does their crazy stuff and you do your crazy stuff and you compare who wins, instead of a game where your opponent's the only one playing the game and then you're sitting there playing your super expensive cards and doing like one thing a turn. It's just not an experience that people have enjoyed. And so, yeah, it's been time. That will not happen ever again.
It's so interesting to me, a lot of the points you spoke about there, Trickster, and a lot of the statements that Equinox made. It is incredibly similar, maybe just nearly as similar. So Alex, I know you don't play Lorcana a lot, but there's been one card in Lorcana that has also been majorly errated, and it's to do with it involves, discarding your opponent's cards very consistently. And discarding cards is also very similar to this, process of what you're talking about, where it really limits your opponent on what they can do. Like you said, it's like one player's playing the game. One player is discarding all of their opponent's cards, and the opponent just draws the card and goes, "Oh, I hope my top deck is a good card." Like, so it is very, very similar to, and I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we do have one card in the game that discards the opponent's cards, which is Baku at the moment. But I think that is a very balanced card in the sense that, Baku is with its higher cost and lower stats, it kind of equates for, discarding your opponent's card. And I have heard there are some uniques of Baku that when you play it, your opponent discards 2 cards. I don't know if that's true. If someone wants to pull up the receipts or tell me in the comments down below. That would seem maybe a little bit insane. But I think the difference with Baku is, especially in Altered, it's not like you can repeat this effect a lot. At least for this Baku that we see on the screen, the rare one. Sure, once it goes to the reserve, you can play it again, and it's going to discard again. But the biggest thing as well with this Robin Hood was, when paired with Waru, a single Robin Hood can basically cause your opponent for 4 total turns that all of their cards are increased by 1. That's one single card when paired with Waru. So you'll play from hand, give it a sleep, it loses a sleep, then it goes to reserve, play from reserve, give it a sleep, and it's just like, it's absolutely insane. So anyways, we'll talk about the change. The change now is Robin Hood reads, cards your opponents play can't cost less than 2. So I originally read this, and again, I'm just comparing to this Lorcana card that I know. They absolutely like massacred the Lorcana card to the point where it's pretty much unplayable now, and kind of for good reason. But I don't think Robin Hood is unplayable right now. I think it's you know, being demoted a lot in terms of its power level, I think. But we talked about this on the podcast in terms of, you know, 1-cost cards in Altered are some of the most powerful cards in the game, purely from the sense that, as you talk about a lot, Alex, they act as an after you almost, right? You play a couple of 1-drops, you react to what your opponent does, and suddenly now this Robin Hood means that your opponent can't do as much of that, you know, I'll play a 1-drop, I'll wait, I'll play a 1-drop, I'll wait. So, I mean, I do want to kind of discuss a little bit more about, you know, the decision on Robin Hood. Was it the right time? Is it possibly too early? Because I was kind of a little bit taken aback, you know. After coming from the tournament, I could see how powerful Waru was. I could see how powerful Robin Hood was. We've talked about it on the podcast. But I was also shocked to see that it's happened so early. But they also know that the next set isn't coming out for a while. Maybe they've seen, okay, well, we haven't printed any cards within set 2 that are specifically gonna help counter this, you know, Robin Hood strategy. But I will ask one thing there, Trickster, because I know you mentioned. So did they say previously on an AMA that they had their eye on this card, or they were already planning to change this card? Is that what you said? Or
yeah, I feel like people can interpret what was said differently, but when I think it was from Essence Spiel, I'm pretty sure is when they filmed it. When I watched the video and listened to them, basically how I heard it and what I understood was, and they said this was the designing Robin Hood like this was a mistake. They said that, like, they just said that. That's one thing too, where depending on who you're talking to on the team, they probably would have different opinions as well. But at least the person speaking at the time was like, we've decided that, like, this was a mistake. It's not what we expected. Like, we didn't realize what was going to happen. And when you read the recent article, they talk about how they changed it very close to the release date. So it's probably just like something that did slide by on the radar a little bit and was more powerful than they anticipated. And so at that point, they were like, that is where they said, like, it was a mistake. The card is not what we intended it to be. And it creates an unfun play experience. Even if we don't think it's necessarily unbalanced, we're going to do something about this. He basically committed to it. So I knew that something was coming. It was just a matter of time. And I was even thinking about making a video to try and, like, guess what the change would be. So it was interesting when I had, like, done so much thinking about the different options to finally see the end result. But I think that, yeah, this is something that has been on the radar since that, at least, like, and we've known about it since that AMA theoretically.
Yeah, they did mention that there, and like it got me thinking about like when the timing around the nerf would be. And I'm again, I'll say this: I was taken aback by the fact that they did this so early because you can let the meta try to develop, right? We've talked about Robin Hood in the past, right? We've talked about ways to kind of like work around it, play around it, and stuff like that. And it's not always ideal, of course, with the Waru effect and it hang around for 4 turns. That does suck, make no mistake. But at the same time, give people a chance to kind of react. We have a new set coming out in January that could have they could have made a card that could have perhaps counteracted it or something like that. But they don't even have the print on demand. And this is kind of what I keep going back to. It's like, it's really wild to me that I think it's a good thing to some degree that they're like so committed to the play experience of Altered TCG, this was a very difficult decision for them. There's no question. This is not something you want to do. Because, first of all, listen to what Trickster just said. Someone went on record saying, like, hey, this was an error. Like, this was a mistake. This was a bad design call. There's not a lot of people out there that have the self-awareness and the confidence to be able to own something like that. So kudos on them, man, because, like, it takes a lot of guts to stand up and say, yeah, this was a mistake. We're going to fix it. But at the same time, now everyone has all these Robin Hoods that they have to get reprinted. Will they charge for those reprints? Are those reprints going to be free or like that? Those are questions that need to be answered eventually, which obviously they didn't even allude to. They said more info coming later, but that's a major concern. Like, are we going to be kind of put like this? I think the ideal situation is when you're printing your first set of cards, print on demand, we're going to just replace your Robin Hoods free of charge in that shipping package. You know what I mean?
I think from reading the article that was possibly alluded to, because there was a section in that says something along the lines of when the print on demand comes out. I'm not going to say the word compensation, but from what I read, that's pretty much what I gathered in terms of whatever the shipping fee would be of what, if you're trying to get your Robin Hoods out, it'll be fine. Like it's on us.
Interestingly, I'm curious too. Now that you mentioned that, this has got my brain going. And you were saying like I don't want to use the word compensation. It almost felt like they basically did say that or something when I was reading it too. Like they did allude that something was coming. I was thinking about like alt art cards, how like alt arts you can only print once per year. Are they gonna let you maybe print an extra copy of like your alt art Robin or something? But this is all getting me thinking because I've played a lot of digital card games. Like I know you talk about like Lorcana a lot. My main game for a long time was Shadowverse, which was just like a phone game. And the systems there work very different. And one thing they do is like they errata cards a lot. It's really easy to errata a card online because it updates immediately in everyone's collections, no big deal. They also, now that I'm thinking about this, is when a card gets nerfed, they essentially let you convert it to another card of the same rarity. That would be very interesting if they let you like print on demand or convert your Robin Hood to a rare that you want. That's like something I'm just thinking of right now. It sounds like a little messy and it sounds crazy, but that is something they could do where it's like, well, if we feel bad that you went and spent the money to buy this Robin Hood rare you want, instead of just letting you print a free version of the trash one, what if they let you actually like trade it for a card that you actually wanted in your collection? That would be like a really interesting way. And for someone who felt like, wow, I spent so much on this rare to actually get a rare they wanted to switch over to like a new deck or something. Or
you could consider something like what if there's a situation where you have like, okay, you have 3 rare Robin Hoods in your collection and 3 common Robin Hoods and 1 unique. Each common's worth $3, each rare's worth 10, and the unique's worth 20. We'll give you a credit towards the marketplace when it launches, or like that's another option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like yeah, and exactly what you said, Alex. Like huge props to them for. I think if myself and Trickster are agreeing that we either read between the lines or they explicitly said something like that, big shout out to them for saying like we will compensate. Like we recognize this is a mistake and this is on us. Again, I feel like I'm turning into one of my co-hosts on my other podcast, Brendan, references Flesh and Blood all the time. Now I feel like I'm becoming him on this podcast where I just talk about Lorcana all the time. But there's a really important like distinction or like similarity to this, because this other card, Bucky, that I keep talking about that got errated, in this set, in the OP kit that was sent out, only now like was it 3 sets later since the card was changed, they have the reprinted versions. But what's even worse is they just made an announcement on Twitter. This is one of the people are kind of freaking out about it, but again, the card's so unplayable, it doesn't matter. The announcement was, we will give you your, reprinted version of this card for every booster box you buy at your like local game store or whatever. How insane is that? Like, oh, drop like $140 on a booster box. Here's a reprinted card of a card you've already paid for that, oh, you get the updated version now, I guess. It just makes zero sense to me. So I really respect, like, Equinox saying, we messed up. This, we recognize this design was a mistake, but we're not going to put, leave players feeling really, really bad. Because like you said, even the uniques and stuff, people spent a lot of money on Robin Hoods, because they were a powerful card, were probably some of the most expensive rares, definitely some of the most expensive uniques. So Equinox want to keep the player base happy and provide at least some sort of compensation. So yeah, I'm just drawing a comparison because I think that's going to be changed, but it's just ludicrous to imagine, that's the difference. Oh yeah, sorry, we made a mistake. No, you give us more money and we'll give you the fixed versions. Crazy.
Yeah, that's actually insane. And I do have the official statement here up on the screen. I know it's really small for the YouTube viewers out there. Just a heads up, you can pinch and zoom on YouTube, at least in the app on Android. But regardless, I'll read it out for the audio listeners as well. Player compensation. Errata or ban of cards generally have a market impact on their value. Ensuring that we put other considerations on top of this aspect, fun, game balance, and etc., does not mean that we forget about those that do own the cards that are impacted by a change, and we will always do our best to mitigate this effect in the future. Acting quick when issues arise, communicating errata instead of bans when possible, and etc. The very fact that we can decide to erratum a card instead of having it ban it opens doors for opportunities. And one of them is print on demand. While we cannot share more details with you at this point, we will as soon as possible. Note that this would possibly not be synchronized with the release of the print on demand service, but come at a later stage. That's the official statement.
That reads to me like, even if it's a case of something similar to what I was saying, it was like, oh, there's a bunch of like in the next OP kit, we're gonna include a bunch of reprinted fixed Robin Hoods. Tell the store owners to just give them out to locals, right? And even that's probably, especially for a game like Altered, even that's probably a worse outcome, because you want to be able to print your cards on demand when the system comes and stuff like that. But from reading that, I mean, if they even include a section for player compensation, it's clearly on their minds and stuff like that. So huge shout out to them for sure.
I feel like there's a lot that we could talk about with this topic, and I think we need to kind of just like keep blowing through it, or we're like gonna miss on like some of the like exciting points that this brings up. I feel like one thing that I really just want to talk about is this choice of why errata versus ban, and like what are some of the implications of that for the future, or maybe just like why we think this was like a better fit for a card like this. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of ways to handle balance changes, and there were a lot of ways too that they could have errated this card. How do you feel like this final result turned out?
It's so hard to say. I mean, it's so hard to say. I guess we'll kind of see those repercussions when more competitive events start happening. Like in my play experience, because there's been no competitive stuff in Canada, no one's playing like Robin Hood at LGSs. Like no one's bringing this to locals, man. Like it's like, you play a Robin Hood, like an OG Robin Hood, people are like, I thought we were friends. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? So like my actual play experience has only been on BGA every once in a while. Even on BGA, people aren't playing much Robin Hood. Like honestly, because there's a chat there and people are like, I don't want you to be mad at me, right? I've got a reputation to uphold, damn it. But so with Robin Hood, they did mention like in the description, I will link this article where they actually, kudos to them. We're giving a lot of props to them, but this is a very well thought out document that goes through all of their things. And I mean, right, the first thing is fun first. They wanted to make sure that the game is fun. They want to make sure that the metagame is healthy. And like, it's just like kudos to them in this case of like, we're going to make the difficult decisions that allow us to basically ensure the game's a positive experience. But the splash damage part's interesting because Trickster, you more than anybody, we always joke about how many uniques you read through on a daily basis on Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist, or wherever you happen to find yourself. Like there are uniques that have this text. Right? Like in the first major tournament, right? There was the Quets that had the Robin Hood text. And like we spent a lot of time talking about how like this player effectively had 4 Robin Hoods for that reason. And so like the splash damage is not insignificant. And I guess one of their major thoughts was, okay, we ban Robin Hood the card, but that Quets still's out there. And the secondary market, they release print on demand, and every unique with the Robin Hood effect goes for that $900 that Trickster was lamenting over 2 weeks ago, right? So I think they did take some careful consideration into those different factors because, man, like the effect was incredibly powerful. Now, in my opinion, this nerf, whether or not it's fair is a whole other question. I think they took this behind the shed, man. Like, I think this card is infinitely worse than it was. It didn't even get, like, it needed more stats or something. I don't know. Like, I think this is a rough hit on this card. I don't think I'm going to be seeing much Robin Hood considering how many good bureaucrats there are, right? Like, the bureaucrats are awesome. The whole shell. This is no longer it, I don't think. But, Trickster, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, right there at the end with what you're saying, where you're like, is this even playable now? That is an interesting question. One thing I like about the idea of like a ban or a limitation in a game is that later, when the game evolves, when you have more sets and other decks are better too, you can remove like those restrictions, and like it's like maybe every deck is so strong now Robin could come back. I think in this situation where they were talking about the unfun play experience, it's a lot less of a power thing, and I think that unfun aspect would have stayed with it, so it makes sense to not do a ban. I think that's one of the big reasons leaning towards an errata instead of a limitation here, where it really makes sense. But yeah, this new version, it basically only means that 1-cost cards cost 2. That's basically all it does. And I mean, when I first read the comment, I was like, is the rare gonna say your cards can't cost less than 3? Like, maybe that would be what it does. Nope, it's just all cards can cost 2 or less. Theoretically, if there are cards that cost 0, they would cost 2 as well. So maybe this could grow in power over time as 0-cost cards come out. I was trying to get the official ruling on if costing free is less than 2, or if that's just different. I'm pretty sure cards that are free will still be free, but if it made something like a Copelia or something that was free cost 2, that could be like an interesting thing as well. I think though, from my unofficial sources, it sounds like that's not going to be how it goes, but I don't know. It's interesting. Like you're saying, the stats, it's like we have this card, the Council, that is only good in some matchups, and because of that, why not just play cards that are good in every matchup? The Council says like on play effects don't trigger, whether it's from hand, reserve, or like the arrow. All of them do not. And that's a card that is very good against like Muna, very good against like Traced. But why not just play the card that's good in every matchup, especially since there's no siding and Altered? And I think that Robin Hood now is like maybe only all right against very specific decks. And it's just going to be like the Council, where I'm like, I probably would not play, and I bet most people will just not play Robin Hood because it's, why run like a card that's only good sometimes when you can run other cards that are good all the time? And yeah, especially with like the 4-cost, that's very high. Like you don't see 4-cost Quetzalcoatl, you never see 4-cost Council. So if you're going to pay 4 for a card, I feel like it has to be incredible like Robin used to be. I think that it's pretty much the end for Robin Hood, and if my opponent plays it and that's not the case, I'm not even going to complain at this point. Like, I'll be like, whew, it's just the Robin Hood. Now I can go to town or something.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said there, because interestingly enough, I do think, again, you know, this version of Robin Hood, I think against like Izmir, I think against Muna to prevent, you know, all like the Spindle Harvesters and stuff, and Izmir with the Studious Disciples and the Helping Hands and stuff can definitely disrupt that. But yeah, it like I think this card, I mean, even if this card had like better stats, I still think the effect wouldn't really, like if this was just a 4-3-3-3 with this effect, it would be better, but how much better realistically? We have a card that's Flamel, right? That's a 4-4-3-3 with a pretty good when played from hand effect. And that's like nearly the difference I'd have to see. So I'd want to see Robin Hood, like if that was a change where I could see the card still be playable, I'd like to see kind of that stat line implemented and an effect be at least more powerful. Like you said, Trickster, like maybe it's interesting to try and quantify, okay, cards can't cost less than 3. Would that be like, okay, maybe we're kind of getting somewhere. So I'm curious as to why they landed at the 2 point. Maybe just the whole thing of cards costing more, they just really want to avoid that, and they say the 2 is like the most minimal thing that we can do so that the card isn't frustrating to play against. And I also agree that, yeah, maybe if they make, well, I was gonna say, yeah, maybe if they make like 0-cost cards, the card becomes really good. But this is just my opinion. I think 0 cost cards might be, they tend to be pretty powerful in other TCGs. They might be absolutely insane with an altered because again, they really act as an after you. Like I wonder if you had like a 0 cost 0/0/1 with just water, would people play it? It's like in
Yes.
certain decks, people would, people would play it. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like it seems pretty good. So
I played a 1 cost 0/0/1 with just water in my deck that I won the Gamers Guild Arizona tournament in. That's literally Paper Herald and it costs 1. So
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you would play it if it costs 0. And just to think
Mhm.
about like charge, to think about the fact that you could have no mana and keep playing the game when your opponent thinks that you're out.
Yeah.
Maybe they pass too.
The 1
Surprise you
point
came
you
back
need.
in.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if they could really bring those in anytime soon or
I
if
agree.
they ever should. I honestly think though maybe one of the reasons they went so far with this balance is that they're like, we can't go to all the effort to make a balance to Robin just to have it
And
still
let's still
be
be.
bad.
It's
Yeah.
exactly it's exactly the same. That's the reason why I think that in the other game, Lorcana, they hit him so hard. They hit the
Yeah.
card ridiculous. It's like, okay, if they made one of these changes, the card would be pretty bad, be in play. They like made 3. They changed like the cost. They changed the core ability. They changed another ability. It's like, but then at that point, this is what people are saying. It's like, at that point, the card has to nearly considered to be banned, but it's
Yeah.
not banned because if people want to play it in this weird deck that maybe it works,
Yeah.
they can. So it's to give the option, but for like, for no better words, that like I think Robin is heavily unplayable right now. In my opinion, that's not to say people can't play him. It's not to say he could have his moment again. But it's also the interesting thing, like you mentioned, Trickster, if they decide to ban stuff or limit stuff, that they can bring it back. Because let's jump. Okay, let's say we're jumping like 4 years into the future of Altered, right? And it's like, okay, man, if we brought like the original Robin Hood back into the set, how good would it be? And you can like reprint it as another card in another faction or whatever. Sure, maybe, but they can never, in my opinion, I feel like they can never like like you can't revert this Robin Hood back to what it was. We're gonna make another errata to remake this card back to the way it was. So that's like a possible issue with, you know, when you do an errata, you commit to a change. But like you said, they're committing to the change and they do not want to risk that, you know, they put all this effort into making this change happen. If the card is still absolutely busted, that is going to be a major problem. So yeah.
Yeah, all the people who'd been waiting for 2 months for this change, they would just quit the game if the next day after the change it was still like the best card in the best deck or something.
Mhm.
Like there would be riots. I think the change I would have suggested, or like what I would have done, this isn't necessarily the best decision. This is my decision. If you want Robin to still be playable and still feel the same, but you also want it to be balanced, I almost feel like they're like, we just don't even really want Robin to be around. It wasn't a plan, or it's unfun. So I understand totally getting rid of it. I do feel like we've said, it's basically just banned. Maybe not. But I feel like one thing they could have done is have it say, cards your opponents play. The wording here was tricky. That is one thing I've noted. And the wording on theirs right now is also a little tricky where you read it and it's like cards can't cost more than 2. I don't know. But I'm sure they could get the wording right. The effect, though, would basically be, other than the first card played, cards your opponents play, their cost is equal to their cost plus 1, which would not make them stack. That's one of the big things I like about this, is when you have 2, it doesn't double up. 1 cost cards don't cost 3 when you have 2. So the version I would say basically would just be like, change the wording so that if you have 2 in play, it doesn't stack and the cards still only cost 1 more. And then the second thing would be, have it not work on the first card. And I think that would be almost balanced enough to where if you play 3 cards in a turn, it does cost you 2 more. But if you're only playing 1 card or 2 cards, you're either getting like a 0 tax or a 1 tax. And I feel like at that point, tax would still be around, but it wouldn't be so strong. And especially on the early turns, I think the most powerful turn is turn 5, because on day 5 right now, you normally would want to play 2 cards, so you'd have to pay a 2 tax, and it's like the hardest to do that on 5, because now you only have 3 mana left. There, if you only have to pay a 1 tax on day 5, probably not too bad. And then, I don't know, I think something like that could have been able to solve like most of the problems while still keeping it around. But there would be like decks where they're like, well, I'm still paying a 2 tax and it is still playable and it would be annoying. It would probably be balanced, but I can see now they're just like, we're getting rid of it completely. And I see not doing the ban. I think Alex pointed this out a little bit. I think one of the main reasons that they have to do an errata and it makes the most sense for Altered is the unique cards. And for, those of you that don't know, this effect has been changed not just on Robin, but it's been changed anywhere that the effect is present. So all of those unique cards, Quetzalcoatl, anything, their text online right now will also be changed for Board Game Arena. And if you reprint it, it'll have like this new effect, which I think is pretty much necessary, because imagine going to a tournament, Robin just got banned, you're like, I don't have to play around it, and then they just play 3 unique cards that are Robin Hood. It's the exact same deck, it probably just costs thousands of dollars or whatever, but it'd be like, you could still face this deck and have the exact same problem, and so I think it makes sense you have to get rid of it on the uniques as well, and so I'm really glad that they've done that. Very sad for players who spent a lot of money. I think that could be maybe a next talking point here. Yeah, what do you think about the fact that, like, there are one-of-a-kind cards in the world, the nature of the design makes card prices go through the roof, and the most expensive cards are the most likely to get erratas in the future? I don't know, how does that feel for, like, the Altered community moving forward?
I think it's mitigated by the fact that the marketplace wasn't available. So the people most impacted are the like super motivated, and like the people like you, Trickster, who are on the Discord, the people who are most likely to get destroyed. Yeah, like they're the ones that are on the Discords and like working like the behind the scenes, like the Facebooks and all that stuff, to trying to find the cards. Had it been completely made available via the marketplace, there would have been many more instances of people feeling shafted, quite frankly. So I think the number of players is going to be potentially smaller. However, like you mentioned before, Trickster, like throw it out there, a random number. How much would you have expected to pay for a good Robin Hood unique with that? Not even, no, any card with the Robin Hood effect unique. How much would you have expected to pay?
I got all the stats for you right now.
Oh, so he's come prepared. Let's go.
This isn't even like theoretical. This is like hard facts. So if you wanted a Robin Hood effect on another unique that wasn't Robin Hood, and it was bad, and it said like you have to control a permanent and then your opponent's cards cost 1 more, probably like minimum 300, maximum like 400. Crazy, right? If it's a unique that's not Robin Hood and the hand cost is 4 or 5, and it, especially like one of the really good ones like the Council, and it has an effect that says your opponent's cards cost more for no reason, or because you control a token, or if you have 3 characters. So these 3, those are all basically like the same. They're all just as good. They would sell for like $700 to $900. Oh, insane. So those aren't the Robins. Now let's talk about the Robins for a second. So that's the ones that have Robin's effect. They're like $700 to $900. I'm sure someone would have paid maybe even $1,000 for that Quetzalcoatl that was on the stream. When you got the Robins that have the double Robin effect, let's say that it's one that says cards your opponent's play cost 1 more, and then characters. So we'll say the second effect is just the common. Those ones costed about $1,000 minimum still. Crazy. And then the ones, the very, very best ones that are like cards your opponents play cost 1 more twice, they would cost basically $1,500 to $2,000 for the best one that I saw sold. So yeah, they are very expensive. And you know, people have complained about the lore of Robin Hood. They're like, he doesn't rob the rich, he robs everyone. Well, the richest Altered players that spent thousands of dollars on Robin Hood and have an unplayable card now, I think he did a fair job of robbing the rich, I guess. It's come around, but...
That is... Well, okay, like, what's really interesting to me, and, like, I understand when we're talking about these effects and how powerful Robin was, like, okay, maybe I can't personally justify that crazy price tag, right? But what blows my mind is that it's like you said, it's probably the nature of the game, the design of the game, these being unique cards. There's only so many of these types of cards. But, like, Altered's been out for, like, 2 months. We haven't had any major competitive events. Like, I can see, okay, you know, let's say, you know, we've got a couple of confluences going across, you know, NA and across the EU. Right, you know what? I'm playing my Waru deck. I want a big unique to really help me in this tournament, I'm going to splash. Let's say I throw down $200. Let's say I've got $200. I'm going to throw down $200 and get this card I need. The other numbers you're speaking of, Trickster, like that is, it's just crazy. But like I personally, maybe because I'm like more of a competitive player, can maybe justify, okay, if I play this, if I buy this Robin Hood for like $400, and I think it's like really gonna help my chances of, like, you know, placing well in the confluence, earning a promo card, or if they potentially decide to do cash prizing, I don't know what they're gonna do, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'm definitely gonna make some money back here. That's the only reason personally where I can see. So there are some people that, from what you're saying there, they're absolutely balling out with Altered. Like, what are these people just saying? You know what? I'm getting rank 1 on BGA. I don't care. I'm playing my best cards. No matter what I play these cards, people literally just can't win. They just straight up concede. Like, that is... I knew things were expensive, but that is crazy to me. Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
My thought was, what's 2,000 American dollars in Canadian? And you guys use quid, right? So it's like $2,800 Canadian. Like, we're talking, listen, Trickster, you might not realize, but that American dollar and even the euros for you guys in Europe, man, it's worth something, eh? For us Canadians over here, the exchange is not quite as favorable. So if you're telling me that I got to spend approximately $2,800 to $3,000 to get a nice chunky Robin Hood that gets immediately eroded, I'd tell you two things. One, I'd be sad. And two, also, I'd kind of look myself in the mirror and thinking, what have I done? You know what I mean? This is one of those situations like that. Maybe this is a problem with me. Maybe the fact that I'm spending $2,000 on a Robin Hood is more indicative of the issues I have and less of the issues in Altered TCG. Because my God, hey, listen, I just hope that the people that did that have the means and the ability to be like, all right, yeah, that was money I would have lit on fire anyways. But like, oh my God, I was having like heart palpitations listening to you, man.
Yeah, I hope those people aren't like, I have to, you know, I could buy this Robin Hood or I could pay my rent this month, you know? Like, man.
It's hard because, you know, with competitions and prizes on the line, players that are like very motivated will want to find the cards that give them the best chance. That's totally normal. In most games, there's like a ceiling that can hit because cards are just more plentiful. Even like the most rare ones, there will be more of them. And I don't know what to think about it. I'd hope almost that like moving forward, the uniques can get like toned in a little bit so there isn't such a disparity. So it doesn't feel like maybe a card that's worth $100 is that much better than a card that isn't. And like that could help a little bit, but it is tough. It's like, you can't really like fault a player for buying like the best unique in the game if they have like the means to do it. It's like, yeah, that is a great card. I would run it if I pulled it from my display, you know? And so it's like, I can't like say that they did something stupid, but it is like moving forward. Maybe if people know that an errata is possible, they'll be more conscious with how much money they spend. And it's kind of just like almost gambling or something a little bit where it's like, is this card gonna like last or not when you're trying to buy it too? That's like a factor you'd have to think about. And I hope that with the marketplace and maybe with like how they saw this first expansion go and when they're making future expansions, they can try and like dial it in a little bit so certain really key cards don't go through the roof. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's like really a great answer right now for like what happened there and what happened to those players and how it might go in the future. That's another thing where like in another game, if you go to a tournament, you pay like $400 for a card, you have a pretty good idea that you're going to be able to sell that card for at least like most of what you spent on it. Maybe you'll lose a little bit of money in like conversions and shipping and stuff, but it's like what you buy, you can offload. But if you're buying a unique card, you don't know if there's going to be someone to sell it to afterwards because it's not like there's an obvious market with a bunch of buyers. Maybe you buy a card for like a couple $100 and you thought it was worth that much, but when you sell it, maybe no one's going to think that moving forward and stuff. So it does make this market a little bit more, I don't know, volatile, whatever word you want to put on it. I would recommend to like all of our listeners and anyone who is getting into Altered, be really careful when you are making purchases. Maybe it's not going to be like an errata, but just, really think about like the worth of a card or get feedback from like some of your friends or people who've like played the game more before making like a big purchase, especially like on a unique, because It is pretty hard to value these, and I don't know, maybe in Marketplace will make it easier, but I don't know if it will ever be like perfectly, like it'll always just be person to person what the value of a card is for a game like this. So it's gonna be really hard to like dial some of those numbers in.
I have a question I want to open up to the group here. So now that we see, this huge Robin nerf, and I'm curious as to hear your thoughts on what you think this means for the meta moving forward. And I'm sure you've been thinking about this a lot, Trickster, in terms of Waru in general. So there's two questions I'll pose. One will be, is Waru still playable? Which I'm sure it is. There are still some pretty cool things that Waru can do. I don't know if it's going to be, as much of a tier 1 deck as it has been when Robin Hood existed. But it's interesting because do you think there are certain decks that Robin Hood in particular were holding back deck archetypes? Even decks that were like, they're like tier 2 decks, but now they can really shine because they don't even have to worry about this. So I suppose something like this gets you excited, I imagine, Trickster, to, start cooking again, start really saying, okay, well, the top deck is kind of falling down a little bit. Let's see what we can do to shake up the meta. So curious. I'll start with you, Alex, if that's okay, to hear your thoughts on, do you think this opens up a lot of room for like new deck archetypes to form or existing ones to just kind of do better?
100% it does. And it's the reason why I started working on a Tijanara deck, because I think that there's a lot of low-cost anchored characters that felt awful to play into Robin Hood. Afanis, a huge winner as well. Think about like all the spells and stuff that Afanis likes to chain together in order to generate value for the mage dancers and for what else you might have on board. It actually has a massive wide meta like implication, honestly. And I think that Waru and Mac is probably fine because like I think the bureaucrats as a whole are good. Like there's a lot of bureaucrats that carry a lot of weight. Robin Hood was kind of like the villain of the bunch, I think, but there's still really good cards there that generate a lot of card draw, disruption, sabotage. There's a lot of flavors of bureaucrat that do a lot. And so, yes, does the meta get a chance to breathe? Absolutely. And I think that's one of the major benefits here. Because you needed it. You needed something because at the hyper-competitive kind of tables there, it was only Waru. Like, the percentage was so out of whack that I think that they were right to identify that something had to be done. But do I think that bureaucrats are weaker? Yes, of course they are. But does that make the game better? Because now there's much more diversity in the meta? One would certainly hope so.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of like the sentiment there. I honestly think that getting rid of Robin is probably one of the best things they could have done for this game. It is really going to open up the options that are available to people because almost all of the decks so early on in this first expansion are just focused around putting the most stats in the expeditions, which is how you win the game. And they do that in very different ways. Maybe you're going to be anchoring characters and starting with like more than your opponent. Maybe you're playing permanents that give you extra stats. Maybe you're using season characters, like whatever it is, they have different ways to play. But Robin really came in and was like, if you play a strategy that wants to use multiple cards, you can't play the game. All of these other decks that just like compete in fair and normal ways now, there's no like requirement that's like these X decks aren't able to be played and the others are. It's like, and I feel like anything can be played right now, and we will see some that are better at what they do that maybe like rise to the top as being more competitive. But even decks that are less competitive now can still at least have a chance, and like with good hands and things can like take games away from their opponent. Robin Hood, it basically made it so that certain decks like it was basically unwinnable for them in the Waru matchup. And it's like, I couldn't bring a deck to a tournament that loses automatically if it sees Robin. And so, yeah, a lot of decks, basically, the biggest one is Traced. For Traced, you want to play a bazillion cheap cards in a day. If your opponent plays Robin, you basically lose. I've thought for a long time, Traced was the second best deck in the game that's absolutely unplayable because you can't, if you face a Robin, you lose. And I think that we've seen that in the results of tournaments where there'll be like a trace that pops up into top 16 and people don't really think about it that much, but it happens all the time. If you ever ask that player their story, they're like, yeah, I never faced a single Robin in Swiss or something. Like they didn't face Waru and they beat all the other decks. There was like someone at Gamers Guild Arizona I feature on my channel who went undefeated in games. They were 2-0 against everyone, but then they lost to like Warriors and stuff. I think Traced is going to be very strong now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes like one of the next most hated decks, and I think the next most hated card is going to be the Bravos Bastion, because that is a card that is also very strong. In my review of the release of the card on my channel, I made like a short. I was like, this card's OP. One of the designers sent me a message in the chat, and they're like, it's not OP. I don't know. It is very strong. We'll see. It is something where it's like, without that card, a lot of the other cards that Trace plays, I feel like they're almost balanced around it, because like their stats are so bad, they're like unplayable without the Bastion. But then when you pair them with the Bastion, things get crazy. This thing says that all cards you play from the reserve get 1 boost. Basically, there's like a little bit of technicality in the wording, but for 2 mana, getting 1 extra boost, potentially up to like 3 boosts with a hero like Trace every day for the rest of the game. Just like think about that in comparison to a card like Ortis Carrier, where you get 1/1/1 every day and it costs 3. You don't even get it the first day. Bravos Bastion, you play this down, you get a card to have a boost immediately. Oftentimes you can get 2 boosts the first day you play this, and then 2 or 3 the rest of the game. I feel like there's not a card that gets like really better value than this. And then if you use a removal spell on this card, it usually means they played a card with fleeting, but you already resupplied with the effect from this. So it's like, it's kind of like Robin, where there's no good answer to this and it's very strong. I don't think though that that's necessarily bad. I'm sure with the next expansion, there will be cards like this that appear for other decks. And if every deck starts to have like kind of these key build around cards, that's not necessarily a problem, as long as they're fun and don't like create like a bad play experience. Basically though, I'm just saying, like, yes, there will be other decks rising up. Stuff like this, Trace is going to be a terror. Afanis was really good and still will be. I think that though, too, just like pretty much any deck, I feel like could be played for fun now. I feel like even if you just want to like, I don't know, play something that's like we haven't mentioned today, without Robin totally changing the way you have to deck build, like you don't have to find a hero that either only plays expensive card or has a removal now. You can play any deck now, and I feel like you'll be able to have a chance. And yeah, some of these like Trace and things I think are really going to be like going through the roof in popularity.
I think one of the major things here, and to touch on, is that as great Haven is, like honestly, it's a remarkably powerful effect, remarkably powerful card. It allows you to execute on your game plan, right? It allows the player with the Bravos deck to do their thing. With Robin Hood, it prevented the opposing player from doing their thing. And I think that's the fun factor, right? A lot of people talk about balance. And I think this is a really interesting point to think about as well, is a lot of people, they seek perfect balance in card games. But what I think that people really like is perfectly imbalanced games, where you have like certain factions, like something like the Haven. It's great that that Bravos has something that they can lean on that gives them that identity and that edge, right? And I think that's really what we seek, right? Now, we have some mixing with the out-of-faction rares and stuff like that. But I think that each faction needs anchor cards. They need cards, not anchored cards, but anchor cards. Cards that they can rely on to get effects that can carry their game plans. And so I think that with the Robin Hood's like, no, you have a game plan? No, poo on that. It ain't happening, right? But with the other cards that are very effective, you are executing on your discovery of the game board, and you're not impacting your opponent's play. Now, we still have disruption in like, you know, sabotage and stuff like that, and some discard and Baku and stuff like that. We still have disruption. But Robin Hood was such a universal disruption that the enjoyment factor of the game was hurt. So that would be my argument of what the difference between something like a Haven is and the Robin Hood. Whereas the Haven's allowing you to execute on your plan, whereas Robin Hood just slapped your opponent directly across the cheeks.
Yeah. It's super interesting, and I think even with the idea of right now, a reason why we think Haven, and we can see that Haven is like such a powerful card, is it's such a cheap landmark. It comes down so early. You can play this as early as, I mean, you can play this on the first day, right? And it's great. And we do have some cards in the game right now that can interact with permanents, you know, can discard permanents and stuff. I think over time, those cards will just become maybe a little bit more consistent. Over time, those cards will maybe become a little bit cheaper to be able to interact with your opponent's landmarks. I think that's natural because, you know, if someone has like a Lyra Festival down, oh, I have a card that's like a decently statted card, but it also like takes out a landmark. There's like some balancing that has to be done in there, because if it's too well statted and it has that really powerful effect, then maybe it doesn't feel great. But like, there's always room to grow. We honestly have no idea what's coming for set 2. Like, we saw a few of the new cards, and some of the design space explored for the new cards are interesting as well. We saw like what's the term they used? Like exhausted cards from the resource zone, which yeah, I guess when I asked them about that on the stream at the tournament, they were like, yeah, I guess we can't talk about that right now. So they were very, very much kind of teasing us about what's to come. This actually also reminds me, I'm going to do a little call to action at the moment for any viewers who are watching. The Altered Twitter account, or I suppose the Altered Socials account, they put out a cry for help today, which is basically, we are trying to get a Twitch category for Altered, which it's been in the works for ages. I've been trying to contact Twitch myself to get a category and to, like, you know, let them recognize that this is a real game. And it's difficult because Twitch usually approve new digital games that come out all the time. And since Altered isn't really a digital game, it's more of a physical game that has that digital adaptation. I know that makes it a little bit harder to get the game approved. Equinox have asked them a lot, so there's I'm sure we'll leave a link to it down below in the description, possibly, or maybe a pinned comment, for where you can basically just vote to have you know, a category for Altered, and it would be great because, you know, we could see Trickster streaming in there from time to time, could see myself, could see Alex, it could even be the situation of, I know there's maybe this possibility that even they just, like, Twitch allows like Board Game Arena as a category, and then you can stream that, which it's not the same as Altered, but maybe it's something rather than nothing at the moment, because I do believe X Altered has a Twitch category right now, because it's like a digital game. But yeah, that'd be great, because that honestly, it sounds crazy, but that would incentivize me myself to stream the game a lot more as well, because it just helps general discoverability of the game. If not, you have to play in like card games as a category, and it's very difficult for people to find you unless they're like hardcore Altered fans. So it would be great. I think it's something that people probably like undervalue and don't look at too much, but I think it would be a great factor in helping the game grow in the digital world for sure. Alex, what are your thoughts on that? I know you'd probably love to get an Altered Twitch category. You know, maybe, I mean, I'd love to do, you know, a Sunday stream of like playing Altered on BGA or something like that. You know, it'd be like super fun.
I should pull up the DMs where I messaged them about this like 9 months ago and said, hey, there's no Twitch category. I believe I was one of like the instigators of getting that movement started. And I think that the link that we'll provide down below, it's been active for a while and Twitch has not executed on it yet, which is kind of frustrating. I think it's gotten quite a bit of support, but Twitch has been a little slow to it. So I think if the numbers get big enough, it could force a little bit more action. So I agree 100%, because I do think it is very valuable for getting that digital community going, because at the end of the day, right, like, yeah, playing the physical one is just remarkable, but the accessibility of being able to play anywhere at any time, it's something that can't be understated. I think it's a very important thing to consider. Now, that is going to take us for time today. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. We had a lot to discuss, and there's always something to talk about in Altered TCG, and so be sure to get tuned in next week, where we'll be discussing the latest events in this wonderful game, and we'll see you on that next one.